Hi everyone, it's Joey Remenyi from seekingbalance.com.au. I have a case study to share with you. Lydia from the US has joined us. Thank you for your time today and welcome.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so Lydia comes with a classic history of vertigo and blurred vision, and the not quite sure what the diagnosis is pathway. And we're going to learn a little bit about Lydia's journey, and we were just dropping in to say it's a bit emotional to be here at the case study phase sharing. So all of your emotions are welcome, and thank you so much for your time, Lydia. Where would you like to start?
Um, I guess with how it all began.
Yeah,
Um,
let's do that.
so I had never experienced any kind of vertigo. And so I'd never heard of any of the diagnoses that come with that. And so when it started for me, I was very caught off guard. It was in 2022, in the month of October. Throughout that month, I had a lot of viral symptoms and just, nothing that would keep me in bed. Probably should have, but I just kept going.
Hmm.
And it was a very intense, busy month with my children. I have 4 children. I'm a teacher. My husband travels sometimes for work, and he did that month. And so it was just a crazy month. And I just felt worse and worse as the month went on. I ended up with a very, very stiff neck, especially my left side. And by the week, I had a week at the end of October that my husband went out of town, and I even typed up like an itinerary for my mom to
Mm-hmm.
help me because I
Mm-hmm.
had so much going on. Um, and on top of it, felt like crap and ignoring it. And so it was parent teacher conference week. And between nights of that going on, I went to urgent care because I was like, I just need to get an antibiotic or something. I just feel so terrible. And I was having some ear pain, but not, it was just like, just for a day. I did mention that, and he said, my ear looked okay. It was just a real quick nighttime appointment. And then I realized within the next couple of days, like, I really don't feel right. I felt not quite right. Like, it was hard to even describe. It was extremely scary. At first, I didn't even know how to put words to it, but and I realized later it was vertigo. But I had kind of that swaying, rocking feeling, just an unsteady feeling. And I had blurred vision.
Yeah.
And so that was extremely scary. And I had like trampoline steps, like where when I would step, it just felt like I was on a trampoline or something. Um, and so I was very panicked. Flew into, I'm sure, was just like the whole spectrum of fight, flight, freeze, the whole, I mean, I really had a very, very, very strong response to those sensations.
Yeah.
And, everyone around me didn't really know what to say. They didn't know what it could be.
Mm.
Uh, so then I went through the typical, went to my doctor. We did blood work, tick panel. She was wonderful though. I will say she told me the very first appointment, she said, have you ever heard of vestibular neuritis? And I was like, of course, like, no. And she wondered, she was curious about it. But she didn't know a whole lot about it. Um, but she did mention it the first appointment. Um,
And for those people listening, vestibular neuritis is fancy medical talk for having a virus in the inner ear that affects the balance organs.
yeah. Um, and she also was really great at ordering an MRI of my brain and neck very quickly,
Yeah.
which I'm grateful now looking back that she, was willing to do that so quickly just to clear out anything really scary. And I do remember the day I got the results. I was standing in our gym during a presentation,
Mm.
that was going on. And I got the call and I ran across the gym, just had to know. And they're like, you're okay. Everything was good. And my first thought, I mean, I was relieved, but I thought, but now what?
Yeah,
Like
that's really
what?
common.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we have these invisible, debilitating symptoms, like powerful sensations, and then you get normal result, normal result, normal result, it's this really confronting situation because then we can start to question ourselves, am I crazy? What's going on? All the external information telling me that my brain, my bloods, my ears, everything's fine. Why do I feel this way? It's like that conflict between the inner world and the outer world is a hard one to swallow, and a really big part of the Rocksteady process really is making sense
Yeah.
of that.
Yes. Because I did get that clearance pretty early. But I probably didn't read Rocksteady until December.
Mhm.
So I still had that in between time of like trying all sorts of crazy things, you know, anything I could do, waking up at 6 a.m. and doing exercises, and honestly looking back, just exhausting myself.
Oh yeah.
I did not rest. I didn't, I probably did like kind of the opposite of what I really needed, what my body needed, but I didn't know, at the time. And so then I did read the book in December. Um, and it was so helpful. I mean, I remember when I started reading it, I was like, this is it. This is what's going on. I'm not crazy. There is hope. This isn't going to be forever. Um, because backing up a little, something I did was join the Facebook groups that were just like general, like dizziness, vertigo, which I
Hmm.
don't recommend, because it was like so negative, so overwhelmingly negative. People were just desperate and, it just wasn't a good place. But I looked for those positive people and I looked for like what is working. And I saw Rocksteady several times. And so that's why I ordered the book. And so reading it was like just such a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. And when did you start the program?
So I started the program in March. I read the book and it was helpful, but I could tell that I needed something more. Just thinking, I got this amount of improvement from the book, but I knew like, I'm ready for the full thing.
Yeah.
So I
And
started in,
there's only so far a book can take us. It's like trying to
yeah,
learn piano by reading a book. Your piano
uh,
skills are not going to be so good. So the book's great, but it's not the full support.
yes, absolutely. And so I joined in March, and I probably didn't use the program like a traditional person. I don't think I didn't go like module by module by module by module. I did at first, and then I would go back to things and just kind of jump around. Um,
That's
but I was
perfect.
having so
That's
much.
perfect, by the way. Just need to insert
Okay, good.
Rocksteady is a random program. It's not linear. It's literally non-linear. So people dip in and out. You do what feels right for you in that moment because we're changing so much that actually the kind of support we need changes too. So we have to have that flexibility and responsiveness. And I would
Yeah,
just insert here saying that I have seen some people go through the program in a much more linear, rigid way where they try and do everything in a certain order. And actually, they just get that they're still caught up in the externalizing rather than pausing, listening to their body and intuitively dipping in and out of what's on offer based on how
yeah,
they feel instead of sort of trying to go down through things in some kind of religious manner. So perfect.
yeah. And that's kind of what I did was just I would test things out. And if it was like, okay, I felt that like this was helpful, then I would just kind of repeat things, and stick with that until I felt like I wanted to try something else. Um, and I was still, recovery, it's like you have these gains and then you take a little step back and then back and forth. And it was like that, really through last summer. And then in the fall, so that would be a year, since everything happened. I just noticed a big shift suddenly. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it just all kind of clicked.
Mm.
And then I was just like, oh my gosh, I haven't even noticed it, in weeks. And I don't know, it's just kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's like a miracle.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the new neural pathways building in. I'm curious, you kind of started your story with the wisdom, I would say, of saying, like, I was just ignoring it. I was pushing through. I was just ignoring it. Busy mum, 4 kids, teaching, sometimes solo parenting. I mean, that's huge. And that's the social, cultural context of the lives we're living in the modern day world. And really, the Rocksteady process invites us to slow down, to pause, to listen. How did you make that transition? And do you feel like that was game changing for you?
Yeah. I think even when I very first started the program, I would just I would do a body scan and let myself just doze off and nap.
Mm-hmm.
I had not done that since this had all started. I just think my body, and honestly, I, whenever I was going through the program and you had mentioned trauma,
Mm-hmm.
I would always think like, well, I've not experienced trauma. Like I don't, I had a really good childhood. I don't have any major traumatic experiences. And I just felt like I don't relate to that. And then it just clicked that no, this was traumatic. This experience was extremely traumatic for
Mm-hmm.
me. I mean, I thought I was dying. So that in itself was the trauma, that I needed to work through. And I think once that clicked, it was like, no, I have to make time
Yeah.
to pause and like digest everything that's happened. Because it was just pushing, pushing, pushing and not making time for that.
Yeah, and holding a lot because you're holding 4 beings, 4 children, and then, juggling relationship and marriage, which is like a whole nother
Oh
thing.
yeah.
And there's only because we live in these beautifully complex bodies. I mean, really, it's a nothing short of a miracle to be here on this planet. Everything's so random to just be alive, to be in existence. And we're full of this complexity. And then we live in a complex world. And I think sometimes we need to just slow everything down and take stock of who we are, how we got to where we are. And, am I asking too much of my body, of my brain, of my mind, of my soul? And to really simplify and possibly even live a more minimalistic lifestyle. I think
Oh
for me,
yeah.
the Rocksteady process is a lot of simplifying. Everything becomes easier and cleaner because I'm not actually just taking on more and more clutter and commitments, and there's more purpose and more meaning, and things slow down, and I can live life in a way that my body can really digest it and I can feel through my day instead of rushing, pushing, ignoring, you know. And in my case, I'm a highly sensitive being. If I ignore my body, I have to shut down my senses and really sort of white knuckle through life. And then, of
Yeah.
course, with time, I'll get sick. So it really becomes a way of life. Well, how do I listen? How do I gracefully manage 4 children? How do I reach out for those supports when my husband's not around? And then it's not even about preventing illness, I think, anymore. It becomes, how do I just be radiant and vital and reconnected to myself? And I'm curious, did you want to share it all a little bit about perhaps what you learned about yourself as you began to put the time in, access some of the, like, your values and that inner work of getting to know who we are?
Yeah. I also am highly sensitive, um, and pretty introverted. Even though I can appear really extroverted, at work and in my job, but um, I found that when I'm doing a lot, we're busy. We've got, 2
Mm.
softball games in a night or something. It's like, yeah, tomorrow I'm not doing much. I have to take time to just rest, for us to just go outside with our kids, do things that we love to do with them and not just the have to do's and the
Mm.
obligations, those types of things, because honestly, they start to feel like they're just kind of sucking the life out of me.
Well,
I mean, really, I know it
it's
sounds dramatic, but it's just,
No,
really.
I actually wonder whether there's some physiological truth to that. It's like when I'm in outer world contexts that aren't nourishing my neurotype and my neurodiversity, my way of being in the world, it is literally energy exhausting for me to process all of that physiological information. So if I'm at a softball game and perhaps there's crowds or bright lights or screaming noises, that's all data for my eyes to digest, for my ears to process. Like there's a lot of busy information. And then there's also the assumptions of what it means, the
Mhm.
expectations upon a mother, expectations upon kids. So then you sort of get all the judgments and societal stuff. The body has to digest that. And so there really is, when you think about it and slow it down, there is a physiological load. And if at any point in that experience of the softball games, I feel a fight, flight, freeze response, I've got another nervous system load that my body has to then calm down, soothe, digest, and all of that literally eats up my life force. So this
Yes.
is, I think, the rock steady way of life. We begin to understand our boundaries and
Yes.
how to honor and accept and really embrace, this is my capacity in this moment. This is my resource. These are my resources. And once we get this beautiful dance going on, that I understand my body, I understand how I want to be in relationship with the outer world, my experience of that is like my vitality comes back. I don't have brain fog. I'm not tired. I'm not exhausted. I can think clearly. I'm really much more blossoming in the world because I want to be in the world because it's on my terms and at my pace.
Yes.
So I think your statement actually stands to hold truth.
Yeah, and before we go do those things, sometimes I have to ask myself, like, what do I need? If
Mhm.
we are going somewhere where it's crowded and noisy, and that might mean we sit far away from everyone. you know, I might just need to be in like a peaceful, quiet corner. And I used to worry a lot about would I appear rude and things like that, but I've looked a lot more at my thought patterns and like, you know, where's that coming from?
Mhm.
Because, people really know me. I'm not rude. I need my own time.
And it's like, I'm curious if you feel comfortable sharing, like, I guess even rewinding back my journey, I remember feeling a bit of a tug and an inner conflict between what was expected of me and what how the outer world had trained me to be as a woman, as this, as that. And then sort of putting all of those expectations aside and being like, yeah, but what's really true for me? And does this make me a bad person when I put myself first and listen to my body and do what's right for me instead of conforming with these sort of neuronormative cultural assumptions? And I think that's a little bit of a journey. Lots of self-kindness, lots of self-compassion. And I just want to say, I think when we give ourselves permission to be ourselves, we actually give everybody else in our community permission to be themselves. So it can become a way of actually fostering deeper relationships and deeper community connection and more respect, both with ourselves and with the outer world. So, do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah. I mean, I do think I've felt that way in the past. I'm a teacher in a small community, and I feel like I felt like there could be judgment if I don't know how to say that, just I would probably act differently, not act like my true self at times because, if I'm out in the community and
Hmm.
it's just, it can be that way. But I feel like I've just kind of slowly been getting more comfortable at like, this is me. And, if people are meant to be in my life, they're going to be okay with that, you know?
Yeah. And that's a really beautiful and simple description of unmasking. And it's normal to mask, by the way. I think everyone to a certain extent has a mask and has a facade
Yeah.
and has social roles and all of that. So there's nothing wrong with masking in sort of let's say healthy ways.
Right.
But if people feel as though they have to mask and hide themselves and sort of shape shift all the time. Like imagine having to mask 9 to 5 every day at work. that's when you
Yeah.
get psychological and physiological harm. It's not sustainable. So we want to be able to be as close to our true self as possible. And it's fine if at times we sort of put on a little bit of a mask just to make things
Yeah.
easier. And so it's that beautiful blend of also being voluntary and conscious about it. And I would say throughout my life, because I wasn't really fully aware of my sensitivities or my neurodivergence, and some of my masks were actually involuntary. I didn't know I was doing it. It was just the way I had been trained to be. And so
Mhm.
pulling back some of those involuntary masks was well, just a slow, tender process, really. But the vitality comes back, the energy comes back. Things start to make sense. My body can relax because I'm not suddenly sort of having to, at some level, perform, which is that
Yes.
it's got that slow, insidious, exhausting flavor to it.
Mhm.
Do you want to speak a little bit about if you can remember any favorite little bits of the course, whether it was certain bonus audio, certain modules, the call replays or the community calls? Which bits did you feel were most supportive for you?
I don't remember specific names, but I know I listened to a lot of case studies. Because to me, just to hear someone that had already been through the program, what it had done for them, that was huge. Especially in those early days where you just,
Mm,
you've tried things, and to hear the positivity and that it was working for someone. Let me think. I think it's module 1. I did some of the easing neck tension.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, that
and because I had a lot of neck pain, with everything that went on. And I don't know, because my symptoms were so at times random and different, I would just think, am I crazy? What is going on? And there were so many things that fit to a T what I was dealing with. And it was like, yes, this works. It's not a big deal. This is, I just need to practice these things, and I don't know, it just, I found so many things that actually did fit my crazy amount of randomness that went with this.
you mean as in things in the program spoke directly to what you were experiencing?
Yeah,
It's like this uncanny sort of
yeah,
like I hear that.
yeah,
I hear that a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. Because, when if I tell my doctor the different things going on, it was like, okay, it just, some of it was like, how is this related? But it did, and the program did help. I do think the paying attention to thought patterns was huge for me. I don't know what module that
That might
is.
that might be module 4 and 5 at a guess.
Um, but
Module
that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Uh, because I am an anxious person. And I do think my anxiety early on,
Mm.
with this really, you know, played into some of that trauma response. And so once I started really paying attention to my thoughts, and, and I wasn't judgmental of it. It was just like, what am I telling myself about this? And
Yeah.
once I really started paying attention, that was helpful as well.
I'm curious before. So some people will say, gosh, the vertigo or tinnitus really taught me about myself. It's almost like I got this upgrade into a new version of myself because it made me dig so deep into who I am. When you say you've always felt like you've been a little bit of an anxious person, which I relate to that too, did you notice that once you had some skills and tools and strategies and the compassion and kindness and the embodiment work, do you feel your anxiety is at a different place now that you've come through the other side of it?
I do. I think I'll always have s- some anxiety, but it's definitely not like it was at the beginning. And I do think it helped a lot just to notice, those thought patterns, and what I was telling myself, did really help. Um, and then the no big deal as well. And it took some time, at first I kept thinking this is a big deal, and it finally just kind of clicked. I
Yeah.
don't know. Um,
I want to really validate that it is a big deal. These
yes.
conditions and symptoms are debilitating. And if you're listening to this and life is hard and you're worried and you're anxious, right now it is a big deal. And part of that is your body saying, I need support. Like we need people who can validate us. We need people who can reassure us. We need strategies, skills, tools. We need this, right? It is a big deal. And that's why we put the money in to sort it out and learn about it. Once we've got the time under our belt, once we come into our body, once we start to learn how to be at home in our body again, and we start to get smaller and smaller whispers from the body, so it's no longer like a huge day in bed or vomiting. We start to get smaller and smaller, less frequent symptoms. That's when those little whispers and waves, they become truly no big deal because we understand how to meet them. We understand how to feel through them. We understand how to breathe through them. We understand how to recalibrate the internal reflexes, and we understand our desired sensations and how to cultivate those conditions for those neural maps to really start to strengthen and, take over. So it is a big deal. We don't want to be dismissive of the experience of whatever your condition is and your symptoms, but it doesn't stay a big deal. That's the difference. I think people who have really chronic conditions that go on for decades and years, it stays a big deal and they don't get validated. They don't get reassured. They don't get the comprehensive support, and they're probably getting handballed to all sorts of different professionals, physiotherapists, psychologists, ENTs, neurologists, and just nothing makes sense. Everything's so fractured and isolated. And that was really my inspiration to build the Rocksteady community, is to have one place where there is a home. And really, it's almost a spiritual home where we have this shared culture as a community where we belong, and we're learning to trust our body, to listen to the sensory landscapes and the sensory changes within our body, and know how to respond to those changes and to support ourselves. And with time, what I see over and over again, and I no longer have any dizziness, vertigo, or tinnitus. When I'm listening to my body doesn't need to scream at me anymore. So it all changes. And I think we take the journey from big deal to a genuine no big deal. And that's a transition which you spoke to, I think.
Yeah, it took some time, for sure. I think I had to process all of the feelings that I
Mhm.
had been pushing back. I know that's part of, I don't know if that was module 2. I don't know. I can't remember what was in what
Well,
module, but
the
uh,
kind of emotions go through every single module, but we do a really deep dive into the nervous system in module 4.
might have
Um,
been
and module 3 is when we look at our triggers and bringing gentle awareness to the things that we want to avoid, and like being really mindful that we're not living in constant avoidant behaviors, which keeps us locked in that neurological pattern.
yes.
Um, and module 5, I love because that's when we look at what happens when it's a bad day, a hard day, a severe bedridden migraine or something, or, life happens, right?
Yeah.
How do we support ourselves? And so we start to develop plans. And um, yeah, and then module 6 is looking at our intuition and how we take this as a way of life. How do we pause off and listen to our body and really be guided by our internal compass?
And I don't have vertigo or the blurry vision anymore, but even now, if I have a day where I don't feel well,
Mm.
I catch things, I get sick
Mhm.
and don't feel well. Now I will just acknowledge it, which was something I also had kind of avoided in the past. Like, I mean, I would know I didn't feel well, but I just keep pushing through. And so I'll acknowledge it, like, gosh, I don't feel very good today. I know I need rest. I know I need some sleep. And I know that this is going to go away, and I just allow myself that time.
Mm.
Um, where in the past I really just pushed a lot. And
And
didn't do.
that's really common. I was in that place as well. Um, I think that's one of the major cornerstone learnings. And we can read about it, we can talk about it, but to actually learn to recognize, when am I white knuckling through life? When am I gaslighting myself? When am I being dismissive of my own internal experience, trying to push through and keep up pace with everyone else? It's quite a reality slap, and it's radical honesty when we stop and go, actually, I need to pause. I need to listen. I might need to change a few things. And most of the changes we make, by the way, are slow, gentle, nourishing, and nurturing. We're not talking about quitting your job and moving countries in a heartbeat, but we are learning to listen to the body and move toward more nourishing relationships, move toward building nourishing community, move toward understanding what nourishment is physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I think it is a slow process. It's a slowing down, and it's really a collecting of warm data. And by warm data, I mean the messages and information signals inside of our body, our interoception, our neural pulse. Do you have any little daily practices that you keep up for yourself?
I do still body scan. That's something I still do. And if I do, it's usually when I get in bed at night. And so it's kind of a nighttime routine, and I'll just lay down. I've always liked body scanning, laying down the best. I don't know why, but, um, so I'll go through a body scan. I do in the morning, I just take some quiet time to myself before everyone is up. Um, because really I don't have a lot of other
Mhm,
alone time carved out for myself. So the mornings I spend just doing things that make me feel good.
mhm,
You know, I track birds and journal and read and things like that early in the morning.
mhm.
Um, and so that's just kind of a morning routine for me.
Yeah, that sounds very nourishing, and I love bird sounds too. I'm just writing my next book. I think it'll be called Invisible Medicine, and it's talking about how we really get to know our neural nuance, that we're all wired differently. Even if you pull away all the medical labels about neurodivergence, every single human being on the planet has their own brain body wiring. It's unique, it's absolutely unique. And learning how we nourish ourselves and how we experience the world and how we take data in and how we excrete, metabolize, and digest our daily experience. It's all of these things you're talking about. It's knowing when we need alone time and how much we need. It's understanding that, oh, I like body scanning laying down. Doesn't matter why. If that's what your body responds to, that's enough information. That's your truth. And so you're learning to decode, okay, I'm not going to follow some prescriptive yoga class or some app. I'm actually learning how I do me, how I live my life, how I nourish myself, and knowing the nuance. And in many ways, I think the details matter. And I think the Rocksteady program is so comprehensive that we have the time and the luxury to find those details about what do I need? What does my body need? What's going to help my neurons to regulate and have that optimal firing more often? And, I think that's really quite an achievement, mothering 4 children, being a school teacher, and having alone time and journaling time and bird listening time. I'm in awe, actually, to be honest. I think I'm
I do
celebrating you
have
right now.
help. I do ask for help more often now, for sure.
Yeah, and we're interdependent as a species. We need each other. We can't do life alone, and hopefully we're being human, not doing human. Oh, thank you so much for sharing some of your story. Is there any little bits and bobs that you feel like you really want to share, or any message you want to send to listeners who might be feeling the panic and the trauma? That was a really good point you made, that sometimes the illness itself and the onset of the tinnitus or vertigo can absolutely be either traumatizing or re-traumatizing for our emotional body. And having a way to work through that is part of neuroplasticity and the Rocksteady process. It's a good conversation to not shy away from.
I mean, I think the program works for everyone, because you are able to pick and choose what is going to work for you. And I feel like there's such a variety of techniques and things that you're going to find what's going to get you back to that place. It's, it's, I don't know. I still am just in awe that it took a year. I know everyone's timeline is different. And I do think I jumped in really quick. I was researching constantly and, got on board quickly. And I think that helped my timeline for sure. But I think that anyone, can do it, and neuroplasticity really works. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm just amazed.
Mm.
Very, very grateful to you. Very grateful I ordered your book to start off Amazon um, and then got into the program.
Yeah, so for those listening, my first book's called Rock Steady, Healing Vertigo or Tinnitus with Neuroplasticity. And the Rock Steady program is the full comprehensive support program. It's delivered in 6 modules, which come to you over a 12-week period, but you own the program for life. So if Lydia has any further medical issues come up, she can actually log right back in, join the community, and go through the neuroplasticity and Rocksteady process again, because she's a lifetime member of the community. And it really is, I believe, a place of sacred belonging. And I love the live monthly calls, and I love hearing from people. And yeah, there's something really raw and real about sharing the human experience. Of moving through the vulnerability of change and transformation and illness and the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual exploration of who am I and how am I in relationship to myself. It's a really, really deeply beautiful space.
Yeah, the community was wonderful online as well. I mean, I still get on there and
Good.
yeah, very helpful. So yeah.
And just a reminder, you're also welcome to join any of our soul tending circles monthly, just as a practice of cleansing where we sit in circle unrecorded as a community, and we're practicing how to be authentic, to take those masks off, to be vulnerable, to be present with any grief, pain, or sorrow that our body might be processing, because that is the work. We have to empty ourselves of this undigested life, or else we can somaticize again and the symptoms can come back. So having these kind of daily, weekly, monthly practices really become a way of life and a way of reconnecting and remembering. So thank you so much, Lydia.
Thank you.
Visit seekingbalance.com.au if you're curious to join our community. We'd love to have you be a part of what I believe is just a really beautiful way of being in the world and a really gentle way of being in the world. So I'm Joey Remenyi, and it's a bye for now.